Welcome to Discuss With Us podcast, where we are unpacking the world through a Christian lens. I am your host, Darcy Durkowski, along with my husband, Brian, and our intention is to pose topics, trending and otherwise, and unpack them with the help of some research, insights from our different backgrounds, and even some listener input in a way that is thought-provoking and entertaining. So get comfortable, grab your favorite beverage, and discuss with us.
Welcome back to another episode of Discuss With Us. Darce, how you doing on Memorial Day?
I'm doing well. We have a fun week ahead of us, so it's easy to say like I'm good.
Yeah, I am good also. I hit an eagle today, so
Yes, you're riding a little high.
A little bit of one. Yes, we've had a busy weekend so far. Busy week ahead.
Yes.
We went to spring thing. The band had to play out there last night. That's part of the reason why we didn't record now.
Yes.
Or until now. And then, miraculously, I actually went out, haven't played golf in probably a year, and cranked an eagle right out in there. So I guess I still got it. Need to get back out there probably pretty regular now and see if the tour is still in my future, I think.
Yeah, maybe
drop
so.
that out there.
Okay.
Plant that seed. Watch it grow. And we are about to go to Nashville. So
Yes.
my little sister is in a singing competition. She's going to be performing at the Opry this week.
Yeah.
So we're going to
Shout out to Michelle K.
Yeah, go Michelle K. So we're going to fly out tomorrow. We are doing a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Flying out Tuesday, flying back Thursday, but
It'll be worth it, and it's going to be fun. I'm excited.
and we're going to celebrate our anniversary up there.
Yes.
Got us nice.
Haven't had a nice dinner yet.
Yeah, so
Brian had he hosted band practice over here
Yes.
on our anniversary.
preparation for what we did yesterday. Yeah, Darcy walked up. I made everyone say
Yeah,
happy
they all told
anniversary
me.
to her.
That was pretty nice.
It's romantic, right?
Yeah.
I think I used a love language somehow.
Yeah, words of affirmation via the band.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so that's why we're a little behind, and it's a holiday. Y'all are probably all behind too. So
Yeah.
said, why not? But today I'm also all out of sorts because I feel like we've had a lot of great guests lately.
I know it feels like it's been a little while since it's just been me and you. And
I
it
know, I
probably
kinda-
hasn't, but I don't know. Feels like it.
I feel like I forgot how to do this, so we're going to have to start all over. Is that thing recording? Did
It
we check
is.
that?
Yes, it is.
But yeah,
Um,
no guests today. So we in holiday week. So I said, what's something we know all about? And we know all about our particular marriage. So that's pretty easy. Not a lot of prep work there, right?
Yeah, you had anniversary on the mind
Yes.
initially.
Yes. It was our month
Yeah.
of love, remember?
Yeah.
That's why we did love languages.
Exactly. Yeah, May has been the month of love. So I was trying to think of what to kind of title this episode.
I asked you that, yeah.
And I'll still have to hash it out before I upload this
Before we
thing.
go to
'cause
bed, yeah.
I'm really not quite sure. But essentially what we have, and this has come up organically in our household
Yeah.
recently, which like we always say, it's the only way we can continue to do this stuff is if we actually discuss what we're
simplifies things when we're
already
actually talking
discussing.
about it.
So we are going to discuss or go through kind of what our marriage prep looked like,
Yeah.
and then also kind of lessons learned up to this point, and what we are glad we did, what maybe wasn't as useful as we thought,
All
and
the wisdom of a 6-year marriage.
yeah,
All that can provide.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this is like more, we're not marriage counselors, but
Right.
we can just give you our viewpoint of what we went through.
yeah. What we think we did well,
Yep.
and what we wish we had done maybe differently.
I love everything about us.
But I also did want to put a disclaimer out there. Like, if you're already married, I think you'll be able to laugh and nod your head with us, hopefully,
Yeah, I
or
hope
shake
so.
your head at us, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe we're doing it all wrong.
But also,
I'll
if you're
entertain you, I promise.
if you're single or newly engaged, I think this will be hopefully
Turn the volume up and listen carefully.
hopefully very relevant for you. I don't know a lot of single people that are looking to stay single long term. So, at some point you might be kind of crossing this bridge that we're going to be talking about. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, with that, I think the way we're going to structure this is we're going to start off by kind of telling you what our prep looked like. Um, and maybe what was kind of our biggest hurdle pre marriage, which I was thinking about like I was reflecting on like that whole wedding planning time.
Yeah.
And it's like it's kind of like a microcosm of like your whole marriage. If you it's like training you, I guess, for
Yeah.
that wedding prep is definitely training you for what's to come in your marriage. It does give you like good insight into your own family, your in-laws, your new family, and all those things,
Yeah.
and all of those wedding planning things that you're having to do.
Yeah. We've talked about that a little bit before. You're right.
Yeah, because I always say that you will see somebody's true colors at a wedding, or
Yep.
not even at the wedding, during the wedding planning and at a funeral, post funeral.
For sure. Well, that's when emotions are super high. So yeah, it's
Exactly.
harder to mask anything.
Yeah, and everybody's different, priorities come out. So
I have a
anyway,
sunburned ankle, so let's get moving on this. It's bothering me. I can't hit my normal
yeah,
pose.
normally Brian's posted up here with his feet up on our pool table set up, but I
Yeah,
guess
somehow the inside of my ankle got sunburned. I don't even know how that happened. That wasn't even the leg on the outside of the cart. That was inside.
you're gonna have to get, I guess, sponsored by a. It's because you're wearing ankle socks. Haven't you seen the reels?
I know.
That's
I'm
what gives
too
your
old
age
now.
away.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's get into this. So, um, again, let's talk a little about like what our prep looked like, what we were doing, and what our biggest hurdle was, which you and I we know
Elephant
that.
in the room, what that was.
Yeah, elephant in the room is during that time of preparing for our wedding, preparing for our marriage, we were still unsure
Hmm.
of what denomination we were going to be.
Yes, both Christians, both
Yeah,
actively
heavily
going to
involved.
church, but just different churches.
Yeah. And at the time, um, we were both going to both churches. Knew that wouldn't be
Hmm.
long term sustainable,
Yeah.
but looking back, I do think it was. I've said this every time this kind of gets brought up. Our going to both churches and like kind of fully immersing ourselves in each
Yes.
church, I think was a very good move.
Well, the best thing there was it wasn't by the time we were coming to the let's make a
Hmm.
decision, it wasn't like the Catholic Church was strange to you. You had been
Yeah,
going in the same as we were going to Cowboy Church with you,
yeah,
and same thing for me. We were like both of them. I felt like we were members of basically.
yeah.
Like
Hmm.
we as a couple, we were a member of really both churches
Yeah,
because we were
and
going every
and
Sunday.
I know
So
that approach probably isn't for everyone, but what it did for us that I do think is good is it gave each of us a couple of things. One, perspective on
hmm.
how the other was raised.
Hmm.
So, like, regardless of choosing one at some point, like you knew how the other was brought up, and had a little more insight than you probably did previously
Yeah.
to how the other was brought up. Um, I already forgot what my second thing was.
I don't know what your second part was.
Oh, I was just gonna say it. Going to both, I think, removed the opportunity for any kind of like resentment further down the road.
Okay.
Like if you'd been like, nah, I'm not going to Cowboy Church.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah. I
Like,
got you.
let's just be Catholic. Like
Yeah.
that would have gone over a lot differently. Or even if I just felt like you weren't really in it, and
Like the other side never got a shake or anything
yes,
like that.
exactly. Like you never looked into it, never tried to understand any piece of it. That would have eventually
Well, it
reared
also
its head.
kind of like to your first point, it also gave me like spoiler alert, we're Catholic, but it gave me perspective and insight
Yes.
into traditions and ways you were raised and stuff that we have carried over into our household still.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a part of that, having witnessed it and everything.
Right. And like I said, I know that approach probably won't be for everyone,
No,
but I do think
it's helpful if
I
you
think
can.
what we can fall into is that we say, oh well, we're both Christian, we'll figure that out at some point.
Yeah.
And I think
And
that's
when does figure it out usually happen?
yeah, I think that's kind of a dangerous path to walk because you'll eventually start reverting one way, and maybe, I don't know, you may not know that you're not on the same page with your spouse at some point, and that's just dangerous territory. Um, Definitely opportunity for landmines there,
Well, it's just harder. Like, when does that normally rear its head? It's when you're having kids, because then
Yeah.
you're having to figure stuff out. That's the first.
Yes.
I mean, it can happen with death or loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
If because one of two things is going to happen. You're either not going to go to church, or you're going to be going to different churches on different Sundays and not really having a home church of your own. So either tragedy will strike and you will yearn for the church, and then you're going to have, all these emotions, or you're going to have kids now in the mix and having to try to
have
figure
kind
it
of
out.
a new perspective on, like, oh,
Well, it's just going to
okay.
be harder because there's more variables then. So
Yeah.
that was both we haven't, in the chronological order of our marriage prep, we still hadn't figured it out by the
Yeah.
time we were engaged or anything, but we'd had the conversations.
We
and
had
we're
a lot of
starting
conversations.
on the path of it, and I think that saved us a lot of heartache down the road. But
Yeah.
we'll get
There were parts of it that at the time were kind of excruciating to go through, as
A
you
little
also
bit.
planned a wedding.
Yeah, we
and
were
so
doing all of this on top of that.
yeah. So I feel like that's where a lot of couples probably back off and say, like, we'll cross that bridge down the road. I
Yeah.
know we're both Christian, we'll get there. And again,
And
our
if you've
way
done
isn't
that
for
out
everyone.
there, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure it worked great.
But I was looking back, I'm very appreciative that we got on the same page when we did,
Yes.
and how we did. So I think it is worth at least sharing.
But so let's start. So
Yeah.
we were at the fair. I very romantically proposed to you on the stage, and now we start this journey.
Yeah. And so we met with kind of both our pastors there in the beginning. And we ended up, and I loved this about how we did it, we had both of them involved in our ceremony.
Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. We were undecided, so we were still, our approach was like all in both ways.
Yeah,
is I
and
guess what I'm getting at. And so the Catholic Church had had several steps that we kind of initially had to start taking to get ready to
Yeah.
be married. And so one of those things was, and do you remember the order of kind of how we went about it? I mean, we met with the priest.
The priest first.
And then did we do our compatibility test then?
You do that with the priest, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And so you go in and do this compatibility test, answer all these different questions.
It was super long too. I want to say it was like
long.
over 100 questions.
And we had to go in separately because we couldn't be in the same room.
We took it in. It was at the same time, but we did it in different rooms, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And then we sat with the priest and went through it.
Yeah, and when I say it was over 100 questions, it was like in some like very deep stuff. Like
it was, and it wasn't like a yes or no or an A, B, or C answer.
Yeah.
It wasn't like kind of a scale. Some of them were yes or no,
yeah,
maybe.
It
But
was all kind. I had I've never been married before, but I had no idea it was that deep. But so we did that, and I remember coming out of it and just being like, "Holy smokes!" And we're freshly engaged, and I'm like, I just made my fiance take this. I didn't know, like, because it got in detail on certain things, from how to raise kids way off in the future, and you just put a ring on the finger.
Yeah.
So it's not like you didn't have these thoughts, but not to the.
it was very drilled in on a lot of them.
Yeah, it was like who's gonna pay bills, stuff like that. It just went really in
Yeah.
depth, and I wasn't even prepared to answer all of them. I don't know if you were, but
Yeah.
so we take that, and then what happens is you then meet with the priest
Uh-huh.
and go over
He
it. So
goes
you
through
don't
it.
even know your results until you're sitting with the priest, and then if there's any, and I remember we came back compatible,
Right.
and I
There was
think.
a couple things that we answered differently that he walked through with
Well, and
us.
that's what you have to do. You have to. You have
Yes.
to. They don't care so much about the stuff you agree on.
Well, remember on one of the things that we did agree and he thought it was kind of wrong.
Yeah,
And he
that's
brought it up,
right. Yeah,
which does kind of make you discuss it later,
yeah.
if
And that was
nothing
an
else.
awkward one to discuss too, if memory serves me correct.
It was.
But
We left there and we are like, well, at least we were on the same page with that. So anyways, we did that, and then I think after that was the natural family planning.
yeah, that's just the order we did it. So
Yeah.
if you're not Catholic out here, one of the things that the marriage prep is for Catholics in the church is you go through engaged encounters, and I think it's 2 parts now. So you do the weekend retreat, and
Yeah.
then there's the natural family planning class.
Even though we joke and give people a hard time looking back because we're like, we actually did that course twice because they did include it in our marriage retreat.
But we didn't.
So it's funny.
Yeah, so that was the thing. We ended up going to the natural family planning class separately, and I guess we
had
didn't
to.
have to.
No, we did have
Well,
to.
I know, but they did it at our
Yeah, I know.
retreat
Anyway,
anyways.
getting
Neither
the
here
weeds
nor
there.
there.
Yeah, but even if you're not Catholic, natural family planning is one thing, but kind of the overarching theme is like just your family planning in general, what you were
Yes.
expecting, because for a lot of couples it's probably some of them it's probably your second date questions like, what do you want your family to look like? But for some they don't flesh it out then, and you're like, oh well, I just wanted one.
Well, but even if you're saying that when you're dating, like
Yeah.
now that we're married, like my view, I mean, we read some of the stuff we wrote down. We have these books that Darcy
Yeah,
apparently kept.
I did keep our books from the Engaged Encounters retreat, so I brought them back out for us to kind of laugh at our answers back then.
Yeah, because some of them on mine are just absolutely ridiculous. And just to prove, it's not like I was, I wasn't like 20 years old when I took this. I was like 28, 29.
Yeah.
28, I guess. And, but my view on what some of this was going to look like was just completely off. But like, so second date, you can say like, oh, I want 2 kids, a boy and a girl.
Yeah.
And until you're married and actually going through the process, because you don't know.
Yeah.
But the way they were pushing us in these classes, talking about it, because I wasn't.
Well, it just brought up a lot of
'Cause
conversation.
you'd never thought about it before, not to that degree.
No, and also not in relation to our faith, and
Yeah,
that was more
exactly. No,
probably
that was-
specific to me. You
Yeah, it was-
maybe had,
No,
but
it was at the time. I was not a big
advocate
yes.
of
But since then, it at least stuck with me enough to where
Yeah.
now where we are.
I mean,
down
it
the road-
definitely going through that class had a profound impact on us. I would say.
Yeah. Well, and you initially at first,
Yeah.
much more so than me, which also makes sense. You're the female, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, especially like our lives at this point now, looking back, that
Mm-hmm.
was way more profound than I thought it was.
But like I said, even beyond the Catholic, natural family planning perspective, even like your timing of when you want to how quickly you want to start a family and all those things, those are all very good conversations to have as you are getting prepared for
Sure,
marriage.
everyone knows what it is, but kind of brief overview what natural family planning is, and kind of just how we learned about it.
Okay, you would put that on me. Essentially,
Well, I
it's
could do it if you don't, but I thought
No.
it'd be better worded coming out of your mouth.
well, essentially it's no birth control
Yes.
and relying on more so on like or being open to, I should say, open to life and open to what God would have for your family.
Yes.
Now, it's definitely not saying that you don't also try to plan. It's not the lack of planning.
Yes.
So that's probably a misconception, but it's not the lack of planning. It's
Which
just
little side note? So not at our first class because we did it twice, but
Yeah.
at our second class at the retreat, and this
no,
is
it was at the first class too. Remember both classes.
oh, that's right. That's why
yeah.
it was dead. So this is why I didn't take
There's
it
like
serious.
there's
Y'all
like
just,
6 kids in the
yeah. No,
the
hold on. Let me explain it. Y'all just
sorry.
need to know why this took a while to drill into my head. So you're right, it was both, because that's
Mm-hmm.
why I was adamant on being against it somewhat. So both of our teachers, it's called natural family planning. So yes, it is about, and there's truth behind this, go forth and prosper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or multiply, go forth and prosper. Uh,
Hopefully that too, but
and multiply, but the planning part is like, it's not like, oh, okay, so if you're doing this right, you
we
should
just have
have
to
like
have all
12
these
kids
kids.
and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. It's supposed to just be planned, but you're not reliant on, the medications and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
So both times we go to this class, both couples
That we're teaching it.
are like, it's not like,
The first couple was like 5 kids deep.
yeah, but they're
And they were
also
like,
not
but
old. Like,
no, 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 not old. And so they were like, but we figured it out now. We just weren't paying a lot of attention.
the second, yeah, the second couple though, they were like 3 surprises deep, and she was pregnant because
Yeah.
remember, she wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was
that's
the
right.
husband there, and we like Skyped her or something in
Mm-hmm.
the middle of it because they had just had another newborn,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like their third surprise baby, and I was like, well, this is not for us. But
Yeah, it is kind of curious.
the mindset behind it's good, but
Yes,
when
it's solid.
when you
Or
are
being
not even
taught by
married yet and you're looking at this and it's like, these are the two best couples they could get for us, and it's not working
No
really well
offense
for
to
either
them.
of them. Yeah.
But no, I think they were just especially open to life in the beginning, but it did make for kind of a I don't know,
Interesting.
interesting for sure. And now um now with where I'm at, I see lots of resources out there
Yeah.
that
No,
um it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
There's so much information and resources and different methods and everything, cuz like I said, it's not the lack of planning and leaving it all up to just, fate, I guess,
Well,
but
and it's becoming so much more mainstream now,
yes.
just in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you don't know about it, it's not being on any form of contraception, and
Yeah.
but planning around, and it's also where it gets to you later in life. It's having God involved in your family, planning your family.
Yes,
That's kind of
yes.
because it's not just, oh, I'm not on contraception, so I'm naturally family planning. No, it's also in prayer, mindfulness of being with God in
Yes.
creating and forming your family.
Correct. Anyways, moving on. Where are we?
I don't know. Well,
Okay, so then we went to the Engaged Encounters retreat, which this is kind of one of the points that I wanted to make is this getting to this retreat. I remember both you and I at the time had what we thought at the time were busy schedules.
yeah, I know.
Little
Isn't that
did we know.
ironic
Yeah,
too?
it's very ironic. Both of us were frustrated with having to check this off of our list.
Yeah,
Not
I
gonna
may or
lie.
may not have tried to find an exception to not have to do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
and I may have championed
struck
that.
out on that.
But so my point is, we went into that probably not in the correct mindset,
No.
and still came out of it with things that we use today, and
Absolutely.
are very glad that we tackled a lot of those topics that were presented there. And I wanted to kind of go through some of them, and I'm referencing this like workbook that we were given while we were there. But essentially, we went on a retreat with other couples preparing for marriage, and they had different topics and classes and practices that we did. And a lot of it was they would present a topic, present the church's teaching on it, and pose some questions for us to pose to each other or pose to ourselves. And then we would have,
Breakouts.
long breakouts,
Mhm.
like 30 minutes to an hour or more, to go. And this is why it was a retreat. There was a nice property that we were on,
Yeah.
and different parts of, I don't know if you'd call it like the campus, that we would go spread out, all these couples spread out and work through what had just been brought up to us. But so it brings up initially, as you would kind of think, this beginning part of this workbook is it brings up a lot of the topics. In the Catholic Church, they're called sacraments, and goes through these. I would also, outside of the Catholic Church and maybe even the Lutheran churches and stuff, I think they'd be called like practices of the church,
Mhm.
or I don't even know what to call that here, but let me give examples. Baptism and, oh gosh, I lost my.
You should have marked the pages.
I know,
dear.
I didn't mark them. But even like marriage and all kinds of different pieces of your faith.
The biggest thing was on each of the steps that happen in life, it kind of gave, so you would have like a speaker come in, they would talk about the subject having lived it, and then they had either like a quiz or write a short answer, and you would do these things individually, and then you would get together, kind of go over your answers. And similarly to what we talked about with like the compatibility test with the priest that we'd done before, if you're on the same page, okay, good. Let's reinforce that and make sure we're in agreement. And if you aren't, like, let's kind of talk through it and figure out where the real answer for us as a couple is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it went through some of that at first, and then it went into a lot of the practices that you would kind of associate with a retreat like this for marriage prep, where you did a fun little thing where it was like called the nearly wed game, and you listed all these different facts and went through them with each other, and which honestly was, and then some of them are helpful for conversation, like you write out, my biggest goal for the future is. Well, that's whatever you each answer is worth discussing there, right? Especially if it's different. Another of the topics was communication, and I really appreciated one of the things here. It talked about communication in conflict, and talked about how you should do your due diligence in framing your responses and your discussions with your spouse in relation to conflict. It made you write out like an
apology letter.
Yeah, an I'm sorry letter. And yeah, it gave you like the pieces of it. For example, I'm sorry for, I know you felt, I promise, etc.
I know, I totally forgot about this book, and given off our love languages one, I just need to like photocopy that for the next time we have a disagreement.
Yes, you do. You really do. So,
some of the other stuff it got into that was helpful, and we did part of this on the compatibility test, but I think it's just struggles for people in general later on into the early parts of marriage and just trying to figure it out is like, remember, it was like, are you going to have separate bank accounts, joint bank accounts? And then you had to talk about that. And there were things that we hadn't talked about, because remember, it was after this, and it kind of helped that we were doing a large portion of our own wedding. So it was like, because I remember we got on like a joint bank account then to just help keep track of like the wedding stuff.
Yeah.
But before, honestly, if it hadn't been for the wedding, I don't know if that's when we would have done it, but so that kind of like flushed that out for us.
But it went into things, and I thought this was interesting.
Who's going to pay the bills and stuff like that?
Who's going to grocery shop, and who's going to cook, and all kinds of things. And some of this stuff, again, like we said in the beginning, you might be thinking like, we'll figure that out as we go.
Or you think it's not a big deal.
You just think it's not a big deal. Like, well, yeah, we already got that down. But I think where it comes into play is, you're raised in your own home. You can't help but have this set of expectations in your head. And fleshing some of this stuff out, it removes a lot of opportunity for missed expectations, like missed opportunities, and so I don't know, like for example, if I'm just assuming that Brian's gonna handle the finances, and then come to find out like he's not that great at it, and we need to look at it together, or I need to do it, or whatever. Fleshing this out in these kinds of, I don't know, this preparation pre-marriage, I think sets the expectation, sets some kind of expectation. Not that it can't change down the road, or you can't reconvene. It has
for us already.
Yeah, it has. But it does, it gets you on the same page. And if you have different expectations, at least you know that going in, and you can start to work through and sort that out. Because it could be when I say different expectations, it makes it sound like there's something that we really need to work through that's going to be very, tough.
But sometimes it's something trivial as like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like cooking food's the easiest one.
Yeah.
Like because at the time we both, because we still have it, we both answered that we both cook.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were dating and even in the early parts of our marriage, we were both cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And then kids came along, which kind of changed things. And that's where you have to like revisit it. Life's going
Yeah.
to change. And now I probably cook 90% of our
Mm-hmm.
meals, but that was something that we just set the bar on. But the thing is, had we never like talked about this at all,
Mm-hmm.
it's, we'd be coming home
Like if
and
I, yeah, if Brian was expecting, a meal when he got home and I didn't know that was on me because maybe I don't cook well or something,
yeah,
but you expected me to figure it out, like
yeah.
do what you know or something. That would have been something that then before you know it, you're in some kind of conflict and not like a major one, but still,
No, it
if
could
you
just be
have these
some of those small
conversations,
things just
yeah,
stay under the surface and start irritating you to build up to
yes.
other ones,
Well, and
I
I
think.
think like when a lot of people say like their first year is the hardest or something, it's probably
Yes.
because
You're
they're
having to
working
work
through a
some of
lot of
those
this
things.
stuff.
Yeah.
And if you can do it pre-marriage, I think it does help.
Yeah, for sure. Um,
Yeah.
Oh, one other one that was funny is like both of us put, and we do like this. We like to grocery shop together.
Yeah.
And since I do the cookie here, it's a funny one for us currently because we were grocery shopping even
Yeah,
with
we held in there for a long time
just
grocery
recently
shopping
have, yeah,
together.
3 kids has finally pushed us over the limit of I can't do this anymore.
Hmm.
But it's
It's
hard.
their ages.
Yeah, it's hard because I cook
Yeah.
and then you go to the store, which I also feel like is a nice little relief of you. Like, hey, just go to the store, maybe take one kid.
Yeah.
But then it's hard because it's like, well, I need you to get what I want and need for to cook. Um, but like that's something that we've had to revisit and go through, and especially because the reason we both put it like when we were dating and stuff, I literally enjoyed going to the
Yes,
store
it was
with
like
you.
a little date.
Yeah, and I don't think
Hmm.
either one of our parents ever shopped together.
No,
I
it
know
was
mine don't.
always, yeah. Yeah.
My mom
My dad,
hates it
it's
when
a
my dad
comic.
goes to the store.
It's a like comical memory for me because we would get out of church and uh, we'd all be in the same car, and my dad would drive us to the grocery store, and my mom and maybe one of us would get out with her, and they'd go grocery shop, and the rest of us, my dad would kick his seat back and take a nap in the car, waiting on my mom.
Couldn't make it through the store. Yeah, we liked grocery shopping though,
Yeah.
and still do.
Hmm.
But that's something we've had to like change, and then there is like kind of the learning curve of like, hey, so this is what I want when I say this.
Yeah, definitely.
It's mainly like some of the meats and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but that's
Or
just
when I come home and I don't have your zebra cakes.
oh, did you have to bring that? Just put a whole different cut the track. I can't do this anymore. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Another section of this that I thought was interesting is you do like a my gifts questionnaire. And so it kind of evaluates through a pretty extensive little practice here what your personal gifts are and then how that looks in your marriage. It talks about like stewardship and
I
stuff.
know we probably should have used this on the using God's gifts episode, but I
I
didn't
know I
really
didn't
fill
even
mine
I
out
don't
very well.
remember
I don't
this
know what you
part.
put.
I don't remember this part, but looking back, it's cool. So I thought that was cool that they had it in here, and then it does have like a whole, and this just goes to show you the kind of drag that I feel like finances can be on a marriage. It has a whole like budget section and worksheet and all these things. Because I have always heard, and I do believe that when you have a stressed budget and or are not on the same page, it just breeds conflict. I feel like in your
Yeah, well,
marriage
that
because
makes a lot of sense.
it's just stressful. So anyways, that's some of that's the workbook that is interesting to look back on. But we came out of there and we still reference a lot of our conversations that we had there. So I think that was a really cool thing that we did.
It was something that at the time I absolutely didn't put a lot of value on.
Hmm.
And you're right. Like since then, there's been a lot of things we've gone back to
Yes.
from that weekend. And it was funny because you're just out of town and it forced you to slow down and talk about, like, we
Yeah.
talk a lot,
Yeah.
but obviously we have a podcast. But um,
Mainly for us to be able to talk.
yeah, But at the time, even though we were talking about all these things, no kids, not near the distractions, like this forced just different topics and conversations than what we were
Yeah.
normally having, you know?
And it doesn't have to look like the retreat because I know like not all churches will offer this kind of retreat sort of
Yeah,
thing.
but I think they all do a lot of the same information.
Yes, exactly. Because one of the options that we had wanted to do and unfortunately didn't have a couple that was signed up to
Yeah.
do it was to have all these conversations and go through this workbook with a mentor couple. And so there's different options like that you can do, or just work through this with your, pastor, counselor, whatever, whoever's leading your prep.
So we got out of there. Felt
yes.
like we aced it on cloud nine. Now we're just pummeling towards May 19th.
Yeah.
It's our wedding date.
Uh-huh.
And now we only had just one more hurdle to cross, and that was going to be, all right, where are we going to go to church?
Yes. Yeah, and obviously more so than that, like how are we going to continue our walk of faith and raise our kids? Because we were at least on the same page that we couldn't continue to do both with kids. It would be very confusing. So yeah, for me, I mean, we continued to go through both Bible studies and RCIA. Like Brian said, spoiler alert. I ended up, and I was thinking about this earlier. I went and did a one-on-one session with Father Ernesto. Do you remember that?
Oh, no, I wasn't there. It sounds like.
No, but I mean, I'm sure I told you I was going.
Maybe.
I went and
a lot
met
of
with
things have
him.
happened since then.
Because I was thinking, I was like, during this marriage prep, it also does kind of give you an opportunity to form some relationships with a mentor or counselor of some kind. That if you were to need some kind of guidance, or have some kind of, I don't know, safe place to talk about something going on in your marriage down the road, that you would kind of have a relationship built up with someone. And so for me, that was happening right off the bat. I went and met with Father Ernesto, who I always say was so impactful on helping me make my decision, and not in any kind of like pressuring sort of way. In fact, it was quite the opposite. But so I met with him, and pretty shortly after that.
So now with the biggest hurdle overcome, I was like, well, we're on easy street now. And we really were getting past all that. But the only thing we had not really figured out then was holidays, which is a lot bigger deal than you think going into it. And especially both of us come from families that we both have two siblings. So there's three total. And just figuring out, and me and my older sister had talked about this. She was married before me. You're the first married on your side, but then all of a sudden it is where you're not there for every holiday or having to figure out the times, line everything up, and we have done our best to figure
as
that
best
out
you
for
can.
everyone forever.
I think what is difficult is it just continues to change for a while too.
Yeah.
Because when you do get married, you may think you had it figured out before, but like once you're married, I feel like your parents and in-laws expect you to have it figured out.
Yeah, there is like a different expectation there.
Yeah.
I feel like I got more slack before I was married than after. Like if you miss something,
Yes, exactly.
Especially when you have kids, then it goes to a whole nother level.
Yes,
And then
then
other
you
people
add
have
kids, but then also like your siblings get married, then they start families, and then everything just gets
People
further.
move and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we took the approach of whenever we couldn't figure it out, we just hosted.
Yes, we did do that for a little bit.
But
Still
no,
do that sometimes.
Honestly, one thing, and me and my older sister, Mary, we always laughed about this. Like, we did chart it out. Like, okay, here's when I go to my in-laws, so you just do this here. And we just kind of boxed everyone in a corner of like, look, here's two of us, and this is what we're doing, so y'all just need to get on the train with us. And that was before kids. We started, because this came up, and we started figuring those things out. And on your side, you were the first one married, so
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of set some precedents there, I feel like. But
Yeah.
but now even with like your younger sister's married, and
Yeah.
so now there's
And the thing
commitments
is,
there,
like,
and
different holidays are hold a different level of importance for
for
different family members and
yeah.
for you yourself, and yeah, it is a you think that you're going to just map it out and then be good, and
Well,
it does continue to change.
you think it's just like a rom-com, like when the problems
Yeah.
arise, and it's not like we've had any like problems with it, but it just is from your own like personal standpoint of wanting to be with everyone and kind of please
Yeah.
everyone. I think most of us probably go through that, and there's a handful of times a year where it's really hard.
Yes.
And so once you have siblings, it's tough. It's different variables. Kids get involved and stuff
Mm.
like that. But I do think with that, like me and Mary would talk about it. Like you just try to be mindful of both your family, your in-laws, your siblings, and what
Yeah.
they're going through. And no one's ever going to be fully happy
Mm.
because no one's going to, your family. And we've talked about this. We have 3 kids. They're all young, but I can't envision like even though
A
we've just
holiday where
started the
one's not
holidays.
going to be able to make
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
and
it's going to
so it
stink.
kind of gives you a different appreciation for what
Yes.
different families go through because you're
Mm-hmm.
only happy when everyone's together. You hear
Yeah.
that, and ours are so young. I don't think we still fully understand it because it's impossible
But I can
for
get
them
a
to not.
glimpse of it
Yeah,
for sure.
we can
Yeah.
kind of project forward, but
Mm-hmm.
that was a fun one for. But we've done a pretty good
Yeah.
job with
So I
that.
think the message there is just basically don't try not to be dismissive of any of the parties, you know.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
you definitely have to be more cognizant of this because you're a boy mom 3 times over.
mm,
And we've
yeah, it's
talked.
like the reel says when you realize that when your son leaves, he's gonna be referring to you. You're gonna be like, oh, mom's side of the family or whatever. Or how's it go?
Dad's side of the
Dad's side of the family.
family. All 3 of your kids are boys, so
Yeah.
you will always be the dad's mom,
Yeah, the dad's mom. There it is.
which does lead to it. So I think the algorithm on social media has got us figured out pretty well,
Yeah.
me at least. But so I send Darcy those reels and stuff like that all the time because I find them. But it can be the same thing over and over. I just find it funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's scriptural. That's why it can kind of sting sometimes. But
yeah.
when it talks about in Ephesians where it says, "For this reason, a man will leave his family or something like that
Yes,
to
father
join
and
his
mother. Yeah.
to join his wife, because then you have your own new family unit."
Which I think it makes sense, especially when you go back farther. So a lot of us have heard this. I think at weddings you probably
Yeah,
get.
and there's usually I feel like there's probably like an annual sermon on something like this.
Yeah. So the man leaving his father and mother is at the end of that. I think that's
Hmm.
31. We'll go back to 22. Wives. So Ephesians 5:22. Wives should be submissive to their husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of his body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so also should wives be subject to their husbands in all things. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and handed himself over for her. I think that passage
It's tough
is,
to wrap your head around. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think it takes a lot of like spiritual maturity to interpret it
yes.
well,
Yeah,
because it can very easily be interpreted poorly.
yeah, when you're younger. So I think this is obviously some of the scriptures that get tossed around by maybe like non-believers on
Hmm.
like, oh, this is in your Bible, this is saying, like, a lot of people take it as like men are better than women right here, right? Like
Or
the
like
word.
women should do whatever men say. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think you're right about like the maturity. I think even having kids and just in marriage it's changed because younger I did not really get this at all. I was like, oh, that's
Hmm.
worded really weird. Why wouldn't they word it differently? And different versions, transcriptions of the
Yeah.
Bible, they do use different words, but really a couple things as I've gotten older and now married make more sense to me. So go back to the first one. Wives should be submissive to their husbands as to the Lord. And I think that as to the Lord is really the most important part of it. The
Yeah.
same way we trust in the Lord to guide us in our
Yeah.
lives, that's what it's saying.
Well, because you should be able to trust you can flat out trust the Lord to have your best interest at heart at all times.
Exactly.
And it's saying that you should be able to, have that kind of trust in your husband as well.
Yeah, and I think it's as you go on through here, and that's where you can't just take one line out of the Bible really with
Right.
anything. You have to have the whole context, just like any side of any story. So, wives be submissive to their husbands, but the same way you are submissive to the Lord. So the way you trust in the Lord, and the Lord has your interests at heart. That's the same way. So a man is supposed to look after his wife with her interest. A woman, by being submissive there, is really just trusting your husband to guide you. We've talked about this where, the husband's role is really.
It doesn't mean like you make all the decisions.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. You're just there, and I don't.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the decisions are more of yours, but
But there are certain things that if we were struggling with something, I would ultimately probably trust your judgment.
no, and I we've talked about this before. God made us all different, and,
Right.
and obviously individually we're different, but even just as a male versus female, there
Yeah.
are strengths and weaknesses that we both have in.
Mm-hmm.
And taking it further, where it says here, to become one flesh, that's what we're talking about
Yeah.
in this passage, is the sacrament of marriage, and two are one, because that's where it also says, husbands, love your wife just as Christ also loved the church and handed himself over for you. You're supposed to love your wife with every part of your being. And then 28, so two husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Again, I think it's two as one. It's not that it's not a wife submit to husband, husband do whatever, make all the rules, everything with an iron fist. It's if you are loving if you would feed yourself, feed your wife. If you're supposed to treat her, and it talks in a different time about putting your wife on the pedestal and stuff like that. And that's where I think from some of the leadership standpoints, a husband has to step up. We've talked about this as the spiritual leader of the house. I think that's something that is called to for men. I think you should. It's a big portion of what came down to us trying to figure out our own spiritual lives and raising our kids. But at the same time, it's not a man does this, woman does this. It's two is one. How you would treat yourself is how you should treat your wife.
Yes. Yeah.
So spiritual tidbit for you. That is also turned into some reels that make me laugh.
Yes. Yeah, and it is. Yeah, it goes to the reels and everything. Where I think a man does kind of somewhat end up severing himself a little bit further from his initial family unit because of what he takes on with his own family unit.
That kind of sums it up too. I think the role you take on to be, if you want to be that leader and have your wife submit to you, you kind of have to separate yourself and stand on your own.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay, so have we hit most of our points on our marriage prep?
We probably hit.
I think
we
beat a little, beat some of them too hard probably. But anyways.
What's the moral of this story?
I think the moral of the story is that if you're in the stage where you're maybe having to check all these marriage prep things off of your list, try to go at it in a better mindset than maybe even we did. And
it may pay off.
in going into our engaged encounters, a lot of these conversations, some of them seem so trivial, and you're like, I'll figure that out. I don't need, a counselor or a priest or pastor to tell me who's going to cook dinner and who's going to budget. All of these things, I think communication is key, right? So the more you can communicate about and be on the same page heading into your marriage, I think the better you will be set. I'm saying this weird, but you'll be set up better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think one of the points that we wanted to convey is that even though some of the hurdles that we faced, obviously, in looking at choosing a denomination, working through that hurdle before marriage um, was really tough. It put a lot of extra pressure on us as we were preparing
Yeah.
to get married. However, I'm very grateful, and I know you are too. Like when we look back, we're very grateful that we did have those conversations then. And, I guess that's a good point too. Even if you are not ready to work completely through it and pick one way or the other at this point, having the conversations are going to flesh out some things that I think are worthy of being fleshed out without external pressures.
Yep.
I had a couple of questions I wanted to look back on.
Okay.
Um, so I think these will be interesting.
Questions for people or
No, questions for you.
perfect?
Okay. So, what about our marriage prep did you find most helpful that maybe like you didn't think was going to be helpful going in?
Mm. We talked about it earlier, ironically. Natural family planning, because
Oh,
I
yeah.
did not think about it at all. Didn't, obviously, it's documented back there. But now, and I kind of touched this earlier, really, it's not so much the do you have one kid, 8 kids, 3 kids?
Involving God in the
Yes.
decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And thinking about it like that with
Yeah.
kids and just having kids versus not, it's kind of changed my outlook on it.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. I think that was helpful. Okay. Last question. What about marriage thus far has been, I'll give you the option to answer either easier or more difficult than you expected?
Oh, that's not fair. It's not fair because if I do more difficult and don't give an easiest, then that's not good.
Okay, then do both.
It's gonna take longer. Hold on. All right, hold on. This is bad because I know the difficult one before I know the easiest. Um, let's go with difficult first, then
Okay.
maybe easiest will come to me. All right, most difficult, and this is you can blame your dad for this because this has stuck with me since then.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
When we first got married, we didn't have a garage or anything, and our house was perfectly large, but it was very kind of open, one big space,
At
and
the time, yeah.
yeah, and and I didn't get it when he said it. This is what's funny, but like not having our own space,
Mm-hmm.
um, like we were
So
talking.
explain, say what he said, yeah.
Yeah, so at our old house, we were talking about building a garage, and I had this monstrosity me and my dad had drawn up that we were going to build. And your dad was all about it because he was like, "You need your own space. It's going to save your marriage." And we had to have been married, but like barely married, and it stuck with me though. I still remember
Mm-hmm.
it, and to this day, as we sit in the shop at our
Mm-hmm.
new house. That's kind of my space. And it's beyond just the space because that sounds like, oh, I need to get away from like you and the
Mm-hmm.
kids. But um, there is, I think you, and this is why it's kind of awkward because I think you would like probably some more space of yourself at a time too. But with the kids, but it's nice to be able to step out. And what I mean by that is we both work and
Yeah.
then I do play music in a band,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of times that's work too. I'm friends, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still work. You have work
Mm-hmm.
friends, stuff like that, but kind of and I get alone time when I drive, but it's like just like my own space to kind of have 15 minutes of what I'm doing. The same way we've talked about like
Well,
struggles
because
for like you
especially
having
right
like a
now,
girls' night or stuff like that.
yes,
Like,
especially right now, our house is chaos with the boys a lot of times, so
yeah.
I can get that.
But so like if I need it's because it sounds bad. It's just nice. I don't even have to use it, just having it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what your dad meant by it. Like you just need a place to be
So
able
then
to
you
go.
would say, how I hear you answering this is finding time or space for your own self
Yeah.
has been more difficult than you expected.
Yeah,
in
because, and
marriage.
the
Yeah.
reason I mean that is when we first got married, you're still in the, I mean, I would still call us in the puppy love stage, but way even more so
Mm-hmm.
back then, right? And because when your dad said it, I was like, what are you talking about? I love spending time with your daughter uh, at all times. Um, and I still
I'm
do.
still a delight.
I still, you look, you're up here kicked back on my pool table, but I don't even play pool up here. All the stuff's up here, but I just have the option.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a
Okay.
place to go. All right, so that was difficult. I better come up with an easy one now. Um, you know what? Because you kind of mentioned this was the trivial. The easiest thing has been what maybe some people would say is the trivial stuff, like especially financially. You and I are maybe unicorns that we. I mean, need to update it, but we have like a working like 5 year goal plan, like
Budget.
financially,
Yeah.
budget, everything. Um, our bills are mapped out like over the next 5 years. And you did that and updated, and I have such buyer's remorse about anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just we seamlessly work financially.
Making decisions.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
you keep us on track there.
Mm. So for me, what about marriage has been more difficult than
Here we go.
I
Now she's got
expected?
a loaded button
Um, so I was thinking about this earlier, obviously, because I wrote these questions out and trying to think about what, it's not like I thought of this question because I already had an answer in mind. I didn't. So thinking about it, I think, you know, you marry this person that you know very well, um, but you will go through things that will change them or change you.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was thinking about it, I was like, we really haven't gone through. I wouldn't classify us as having gone through a lot of those scenarios because what I had in my head was like some kind of grief or
Mm.
something like that I know can very deeply affect
Yeah.
people and like kind of their trajectory, the
Mm-hmm.
rest of their life, really.
Yeah.
Um, and we really have been blessed up to this point to not have to shoulder a lot of that yet.
Yeah.
But as I was thinking about that, I went back to this time, and I assume I can share this about you. You've
Great.
mentioned it before, kind of in passing on the podcast, so I'm going to mention it again. You had this time where you were dealing with a little bit of like anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is, at that point, you were suddenly someone that was dealing with something that I had never seen you deal with before,
Mm-hmm.
and it was affecting you quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so just realizing
Thick and thin
through
came.
thick and thin.
Came real hard
And
and
it's not,
fast. Huh?
it wasn't that I was like, oh, I wish I'd have cut bait with this guy before. It wasn't anything like that. It was just realizing that, like I said, you marry this person and you can kind of like clearly see, not clearly see, but you think you can clearly see
Yeah.
the rest of your life and what your interactions are going to
Uh-huh.
be. And then, and this can look different on different people. Like, maybe an illness or like I said earlier, grief or something that is, represents that thick and thin
Yeah.
that shapes them, even if it's just temporarily. It was temporary for you, but it was something that was like, oh man, okay, I've got to support him through this. And
Yeah.
I did not, I do not feel trained for this, and like kind of having to, I don't know.
You had to wear a different hat than what
I
you
had to
thought.
wear a different hat, I guess. Yeah, maybe so. And so I just thought back to that, and like I said, it's not like I even ever, at any point, wavered. I knew we were going to get through it, but it was just something that those things are the things that you don't see coming. You don't know how they're going to affect you. You
Exactly. So
can't
you can't
plan
prep
them.
for 'em.
Yeah, you can't. None of this prep will help you. That's where the vows before God and the commitment and the it being a cord of three where you're all in it, pull you through that kind of thing, because I think that can derail people. So yeah, I got deep on that one.
Yeah, you did. What's your easiest one now?
I didn't think about that one. I thought about that question afterwards.
Baloney.
Easiest. this is going to be really ironic because you just said how you are glad that you have like a space away from me, essentially. No, I'm just kidding. Um, and I am a very independent person, and I would have thought that I would have needed more space from you than I do. That is actually easier. Like, I still, to this day, we're pretty joined at the hip doing a lot of things. So,
Yes.
and I don't know that I would have pictured that like for me in a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So that's been easy and still fun.
So that's funny. So you're saying you love how much time we spend together, and I said that's my hardest thing.
It's not your hardest thing.
Well, that's how it comes
I
across,
know
I feel like.
this is funny.
This is coming off the rails now. Let me clarify.
You don't
I
need to
love
clarify.
spending time with you.
I know you do. It's fine. Oh, perfect. I love it.
I just love having the option.
Yes. No, it's healthy
And
to
it was
have the
also,
option.
because we've talked about, because I'm not able to explain this because it was really hard to even think about, but it's the kids more than anything. Like, we don't do a lot of the stuff that we used to do
Yes.
with, like, and I guess it's on my mind because I just got back from playing golf. I mean, my sunburn is literally kicking in right now. And I haven't played golf in over a year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like those things is
Yeah.
kind of what I was saying. That's the most difficult thing to adjust to is
Yeah.
it's not so much the marriage, it's the kids that come with a marriage that
Blame it on the kids. They can't even speak for themselves.
they're asleep. Here you go. Listen to this when
Oh,
you're older.
this is so funny to me. Okay.
So let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. Yeah. Communicate sooner than later.
That's gonna do it for us today. What are we talking? You have a list. What are we talking
Yeah.
about next
Okay.
week?
So next week, I am so excited. We are going to have a guest on here because I know all of you parents are going to be adjusting to
It's summer now,
summertime.
yeah.
And even if you still have your kids in school, daycare, whatever, there's usually an adjustment in schedule. In fact, you're probably like us and trying to figure out, this week because it's probably in service. You have a break. But so kids at home for the summer. And I'm going to have a guest on who's going to hopefully help us work through some different summer ideas.
Cool.
She homeschools her kids, and I followed her for a while. She has some great ideas. I think her kids, I mean, this is obviously my opinion, but I think they look very well formed, and I'm excited to see what she does. And not only that, but their household. I'm hoping that we can emulate some of that in our summer structure this
Cool.
year and get some new ideas too. Because I did somewhat of a curriculum last year for quote
Hey,
unquote
you had
homeschool.
fun with it too.
I did have a lot of fun with it, and that's kind of what I want to capture here too. Is she seems to have a lot of fun with it as well. So all that to say, next week's going to be good too.
Man, I'm ready.
All right.
All right, so I don't know exactly what all we discussed about marriage prep or what we're going to title this, but we went through a lot of stuff and we unpacked a whole bunch of marriage preparation, kind of what that looks like, conversations maybe you could
Lessons
have.
learned.
Yeah. Evaluations you can do in your married life to keep you headed in the same right direction.
Yeah.
So, as we have unpacked all of that, now you go discuss.